The sky above Earth glimmered as a sleek, silver spacecraft sliced through the clouds, barely noticeable to the untrained human eye. Inside, Ziva, a striking alien beauty, adjusted her dark cloak nervously. Her species, the Villani, had long been observing humanity from a distance, but now Ziva was tasked with something unprecedented, making the first face-to-face connection with humans. The stakes were high. Success could lead to peaceful intergalactic relations, but failure could mean distrust or worse, conflict. Zygo was an outlier among her kind. While others studied human history and culture with a detached interest, she had become fascinated, even captivated, by the complexity of human emotions. She wanted to experience them herself. Now she was on Earth, ready to initiate the first contact, but things were already getting complicated. Her landing had gone unnoticed, but she knew she couldn't stay hidden forever. With her heart pounding in her chest, a sensation she had only read about, Ziva descended from the ship onto the outskirts of a bustling city. She activated her holographic disguise, her alien features morphing into those of a beautiful human woman with glowing blue eyes. This form, while convincing, did little to calm her racing thoughts. Humans were unpredictable, emotional creatures, and Ziva wasn't sure if they'd welcome her or see her as a threat. As she wandered toward the city center, Ziva rehearsed the script her superiors had given her. I come in peace, seeking knowledge and understanding. But deep down, she felt the script was wrong. This mission wasn't just about research or diplomacy for her, it was personal. She wanted to connect, to feel what humans felt, to understand their relationships, emotions, and desires. However, Ziva knew her journey wouldn't be easy. Suddenly, Ziva found herself standing in front of a dimly lit bar. Inside, the muffled sound of laughter and music echoed, and for the first time, she felt a pang of fear. This was her chance, her opportunity to understand the elusive human experience, but her heart raced with uncertainty. Could she truly bridge the gap between her world and theirs? Taking a deep breath, Ziva pushed open the door and stepped into the bar. Inside the bar, the air was thick with the scent of alcohol and human sweat. Ziva scanned the room, her eyes lingering on the sea of unfamiliar faces. Her training had prepared her for this moment, but nothing could have prepared her for the overwhelming energy that pulsed through the room. She could feel the humans' emotions, joy, frustration, loneliness, all blending into an intoxicating brew. At the counter, a man in his mid-30s sat slouched over his drink, lost in his thoughts. His rugged appearance and tired eyes made him seem like someone who had lived through more than his share of disappointments. His name, as her ship's database had informed her, was Liam, a former scientist who had turned his back on his career after a personal tragedy. Liam was the type of human Ziva had been most curious about, one who had experienced deep emotional loss. Gathering her courage, Ziva approached him. "Hello," she said, her voice soft yet carrying a weight of curiosity. Liam glanced up, surprised by the sudden intrusion. He studied her face for a moment, clearly taken aback by her striking beauty and strange, otherworldly eyes. "Hi," he replied, his voice gruff but polite. "You new in town?" Ziva nodded, unsure of how much to reveal. "Yes, you could say that." There was an awkward silence between them. Ziva had learned that humans often used small talk to break the ice, but it felt unnatural to her. She decided to take a more direct approach. "I'm looking for someone who can help me understand human emotions," she blurted out, instantly regretting how forward she sounded. Liam raised an eyebrow, amused but confused. "You picked the wrong guy for that. Emotions and I don't really get along these days." Ziva felt a pang of empathy. Her mission wasn't just about observing. It was about connecting, and here was a man who had shut himself off from the very thing she was trying to understand. "Maybe I could help you, too," she offered, her alien instincts kicking in. "We could help each other." Liam looked at her more closely, sensing something odd but compelling about her. "Help each other, huh? And what exactly are you trying to learn?" Ziva hesitated for a moment before replying. everything. What it means to feel joy, sadness, love, and pain. I want to know what drives humans to connect with one another. Liam chuckled, shaking his head. You sound like an alien, he said half-jokingly, not realizing how close he was to the truth. Ziva smiled faintly, her heart racing. Perhaps in some ways, I am. Over the next few hours, Ziva and Liam talked. At first, their conversation was stilted, but as Liam drank more, he began to open up about his life. He spoke about the loss of his wife, the reason he had abandoned his research, and how he had been drifting ever since. Ziva listened intently, absorbing every word, every emotion. This wasn't just a scientific study for her anymore. This was real. She could feel his pain as if it were her own. As the night wore on, Liam's defenses began to crumble. You know, I've never told anyone this much about myself before, he admitted, staring into his glass. Ziva smiled gently. Maybe that's because no one has ever truly listened. Liam looked at her, his expression softening. Maybe you're right. The bar had emptied out by now, leaving just the two of them in the dim light. Ziva could feel the connection growing between them, something beyond words, something human. It was exhilarating, but also terrifying. Could she really be forming a bond with this man, a human? Would he ever accept her for what she truly was? But before she could ponder the implications, a loud crash from outside shattered the moment. The door burst open, and three men barged in, their eyes wild and aggressive. Hey lady, one of them snarled, you're not from around here, are you? Ziva's heart raced. Her disguise had worked so far, but something about these men felt different. They could sense she didn't belong. Things were about to get very complicated, very fast. The three men stood menacingly in the doorway, their eyes locked onto Ziva with unsettling intensity. Liam immediately straightened up, his senses sharpened by the sudden tension. Ziva, though calm on the outside, felt her heart racing faster than ever. These men weren't just local troublemakers. They seemed to know, or at least suspect, something more about her. What's it to you? Liam asked, his voice steady but with an edge of protectiveness. The leader of the group, a burly man with a scar running down his cheek, sneered. We've been tracking some unusual activity in this area. You think we don't notice when something, not quite human, shows up? Ziva's stomach dropped. Had her mission been compromised? Had someone noticed her arrival, or worse, informed others? She kept her holographic disguise intact, but now her mind raced, calculating potential exits and outcomes. I don't know what you're talking about, Ziva replied evenly, her eyes locking with the man's. I'm just here having a drink with my friend. Friend? The man laughed, his companions joining in. Is that what they call it now? You're hiding something, and we're gonna find out what. Liam stood up from his seat, now fully alert. Look, I don't know who you are, but you need to leave. She hasn't done anything, and you're not about to start something here. The man ignored him, stepping closer to Ziva. You think you're clever, don't you? He raised a hand toward her, as if he were going to touch her face. Instinctively, Ziva backed away, her mind preparing to activate her ship's defensive systems. But Liam stepped in between them, blocking the man's advance. Back off, Liam growled, his voice hard with determination. The room fell silent as the tension thickened. Ziva could feel the danger rising, and it was clear that these men weren't going to let this go. They knew too much. The leader chuckled, his face twisting into a cruel smile. You're going to regret this, pal. We're not leaving until we get some answers. Ziva could feel the atmosphere crackling with impending violence. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from fear for herself, but for Liam. He had no idea who, or what, he was protecting. In a moment of clarity, Ziva made a decision. She would not allow anyone to get hurt because of her presence. She stepped forward, her voice calm but commanding. Leave him out of this, she said, her alien nature slipping into her tone. This is between me and you. The men exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering across their faces. Something about her words had shaken them. But they weren't backing down. Not yet. Suddenly, the leader lunged at Ziva, but before he could reach her, Liam swung his fist, catching the man squarely on the jaw. The force of the punch sent him stumbling backward into his companions, who looked stunned for a moment before rushing at Liam in retaliation. The bar erupted into chaos. Tables were overturned. Chairs smashed as the brawl began. Liam, despite being outnumbered, held his own with surprising strength and speed. Ziva, torn between her desire to help and the risk of revealing her true identity, hesitated for a moment too long. One of the men managed to grab Liam from behind, locking his arms in place while another moved in to strike. Without thinking, Ziva acted. With a swift movement, she reached out and grabbed the man's arm, twisting it with a strength far beyond what her human appearance suggested. The man screamed in pain and fell to the floor. The room fell silent. The remaining attackers, now aware that something was very wrong, stared at Ziva in shock. "What the hell are you?" one of them gasped, his voice shaking. Ziva's cover had been blown. She could see it in their eyes. The fear, the confusion, the realization that she wasn't human. She glanced at Liam, who was breathing heavily from the fight, but watching her with a mix of disbelief and awe. He had seen her strength, and now he knew that she wasn't who she appeared to be. For a moment, no one moved. Then the leader, still clutching his jaw, scrambled to his feet. "Let's get out of here," he muttered, glaring at Ziva. "This isn't over." Without another word, the three men stumbled out of the bar, leaving Ziva and Liam standing in the wreckage. The silence that followed was deafening. Ziva turned to Liam, her heart heavy. She had failed. He had seen too much, and now everything had changed. The connection she had begun to form with him was now tainted with the weight of her secret. I can explain," Ziva started, her voice soft, but Liam held up a hand, cutting her off. "You don't need to," he said, his voice calmer than she expected. He looked at her, not with fear, but with understanding. "I knew from the moment I met you that something was different. I just didn't know what." Ziva searched his face for signs of anger or betrayal, but all she found was curiosity. "You're not afraid?" Liam shook his head slowly. "Honestly, I'm more confused than afraid. But if you're here to hurt anyone, you would have done it by now." He paused, studying her closely. "So, what are you really doing here?" Ziva took a deep breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "I came to Earth to understand humans. Your emotions, your connections. I wanted to learn what makes your species so unique." Liam's brow furrowed, but he didn't interrupt. "I'm not human, Liam," Ziva continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm from a species far beyond this planet, sent here to observe and learn. But now, it's more than that. I didn't expect to feel this way, to care so much." Liam stared at her for a long moment, processing everything she had said. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft but steady. "So, what happens now?" Ziva didn't have an answer. She didn't know what would happen next, only that everything had changed. The experiment was over, but something much deeper had begun, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. The bar was eerily quiet after the chaos, the shattered furniture and spilled drinks a stark reminder of the danger that had just passed. Ziva and Liam stood in the dim light, the weight of her revelation hanging between them like a thick fog. Ziva could see the wheels turning in Liam's mind, processing everything she had said. Liam rubbed the back of his neck, his brow furrowed in thought. "So, you're an alien," he said, breaking the silence, his voice carrying a mix of disbelief and curiosity. Ziva nodded slowly, her violet eyes glowing faintly in the low light. "Yes, but I never intended for you to find out this way. I didn't want to put you in danger." Liam let out a short laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Well, that didn't exactly go as planned, did it?" He sighed, shaking his head. "Those guys, how did they know?" I mean, they seem to recognize something about you. Scifi frowned, her mind racing. I don't know. It's possible there are humans who are aware of other life forms. My mission was supposed to be discreet, but maybe our presence has been detected by certain groups. They may have been tracking me. Your mission? Liam echoed. You keep saying that, but what exactly is your mission? Are you just here to observe humans, or is there something more? Scifi hesitated. This was the moment she had dreaded. The moment when she would have to reveal the full extent of her purpose on Earth. But after everything that had happened, after the connection she had formed with Liam, she owed him the truth. I was sent here by my people to study human relationships, she began, her voice soft but clear. Our species reproduces through genetic engineering, and we don't form emotional bonds the way humans do. But we've observed how powerful your connections are, your emotions, your empathy, your capacity for love. We wanted to understand it, to see if it could be replicated or used to enhance our own genetic evolution. Liam's eyes widened slightly. You're studying us. To change your species, Scifi nodded. In a way, yes. But it wasn't supposed to be invasive. I was just meant to observe from a distance, to learn through interactions without revealing myself. I never intended to involve anyone directly. Liam was silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of her words. When he finally spoke, his voice was laced with a strange mix of awe and sadness. And what happens when your study is complete? Do you just leave? Go back to your planet and move on with whatever experiment you're running? Scifi looked down, her heart heavy. That was the plan, she admitted quietly. But things have changed. I didn't anticipate feeling this way. I didn't expect to care so much about what I was studying. About you. Liam's expression softened as he took a step closer to her. You care about me. Scifi met his gaze, her eyes filled with an emotion she was still struggling to understand. Yes, she whispered. More than I should. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension, a connection that transcended the boundaries of their species. For the first time in her life, Scifi felt vulnerable, not because of the threat from the men who had attacked them, but because of the emotional bond she was forming with Liam. It was a feeling she had never experienced before, something raw and overwhelming. But just as the moment seemed to deepen, a sharp beeping sound broke the silence. Scifi stiffened, reaching into her pocket to pull out a small, sleek device. Her heart sank as she read the message flashing across the screen. Mission compromised. Return to base immediately. Liam noticed the shift in her expression. What is it? Scifi looked up at him, her eyes filled with conflict. I've been called back. My mission. It's over. Liam frowned, his confusion quickly turning to alarm. What do you mean, over? Are they going to take you away? Scifi shook her head. I don't know. But if they detected that my cover is blown, they won't risk me staying here any longer. I'm a liability now. I may be forced to leave Earth altogether. Panic flashed in Liam's eyes. No, you can't leave. Not like this. I don't have a choice, Scifi said, her voice thick with emotion. If I stay, I'll endanger you and anyone else who comes into contact with me. My people won't allow that. Liam grabbed her hand, his grip firm but gentle. There has to be another way. We can figure this out. You don't have to go. Scifi's heart ached at the desperation in his voice. She wanted to stay, more than anything. She wanted to continue this strange, beautiful connection she had found with him. But the reality of her situation loomed over her like a dark cloud. I don't know if there is another way, she said softly. My people are watching. If I disobey their orders, it could lead to consequences. Liam's face hardened with determination. Then we'll face them together. I'm not letting you go without a fight. Scifi's breath caught in her throat. His words stirred something deep within her, a fierce, protective instinct she had never felt before. She had always followed orders, always done what was expected of her. But now, standing here with Liam, she realized that she was willing to risk everything to stay. But before she could respond, a low hum filled the air, and the lights in the bar flickered ominously. Ziva's eyes widened in alarm. "They're here," she whispered. Liam looked around, panic rising in his chest. "Who's here?" "My people," Ziva said, her voice trembling. "They're coming for me." Suddenly, the front door burst open again, but this time, it wasn't humans who entered. A tall, sleek figure, draped in silver armor, stood in the doorway, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Behind it, two more figures stepped into the bar, their presence radiating authority and power. Ziva took a step back, her heart pounding. She recognized them immediately, enforcers from her homeworld. They had come to retrieve her. The leader of the group stepped forward, his voice cold and emotionless. "Ziva, you've compromised the mission. It's time to return." Liam stepped in front of Ziva, shielding her with his body. "She's not going anywhere." The enforcer's eyes narrowed, and in an instant, a beam of light shot from his hand, freezing Liam in place. He stood there, unable to move, his face contorted with fear. "No," Ziva screamed, rushing forward, but the enforcers blocked her path. "You've grown too attached to this human," the leader said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You were supposed to observe, not interfere. Now you will face the consequences of your actions." Ziva's heart raced. She had made a terrible mistake, and now she was going to lose everything, unless she fought back. Ziva's mind raced as the enforcers advanced. Her heart thundered in her chest, the weight of their cold, unforgiving presence filling the air. These were no ordinary emissaries from her world. They were the elite, trained to handle those who violated the strict protocols of their mission. If she didn't comply, the consequences could be catastrophic not just for her, but for Liam as well. The leader's metallic voice echoed through the room. "You will come with us, Ziva. There is no other option." But Ziva knew there was one last option, one she had never dared consider before. It was dangerous, reckless even. But at this moment, standing between the enforcers and Liam, she knew she had to make a choice that could alter everything. "No," she said, her voice firm, surprising even herself with the resolve that surged through her. "I'm not going back with you." The enforcers halted, their glowing eyes narrowing in unison. The leader cocked his head, clearly confused. "You are defying a direct order." Ziva took a step forward, her body vibrating with a mix of fear and defiance. "I've learned something on this planet that I never understood before. Emotion. Connection. And now, I see the value in it. I won't let you take that from me." The enforcer's gaze darkened, and without warning, he raised his hand, sending a pulse of energy towards Ziva. She dodged to the side just in time, the beam narrowly missing her and scorching the floor where she had stood. The smell of burnt wood filled the air. Liam, still frozen in place by the enforcer's earlier attack, could only watch in terror as the scene unfolded. His mind screamed at him to move, to help, but his body was locked, trapped by the alien technology. Ziva, breathing heavily, glanced at Liam, her heart aching. She had to protect him. He was the reason she was fighting now. For the first time, she understood what it meant to truly care about someone else, to put their life before her own. The enforcers weren't going to back down. They had one mission: to retrieve her and erase all evidence of her presence on Earth, including Liam. If they succeeded, everything she had learned, everything she had felt, would be lost. "I won't let you harm him," Ziva declared, her voice sharp and clear. "You are one against us," the enforcer sneered, taking another step toward her. "You stand no chance." But Ziva wasn't the same being she had been when she arrived on Earth. Her time here, her interactions with Liam, had awakened something inside her, a fire, a will to fight for what mattered. With a sudden burst of energy, Ziva extended her hands, calling upon the latent abilities her species possessed, but rarely used. A bright, shimmering light formed around her, and the enforcers recoiled slightly, surprised by her unexpected resistance. The leader recovered quickly, his expression hardening. "You will regret this, Ziva." The other two enforcers moved in, their hands crackling with energy as they prepared to subdue her. But Ziva stood her ground, the shimmering barrier around her growing stronger with each second. She could feel the power flowing through her veins, fueled by her determination to protect Liam at all costs. As the first enforcer lunged at her, Ziva shifted her weight, sidestepping his attack and sending a shockwave of energy in his direction. The force of it knocked him off his feet, crashing into a nearby table with a deafening thud. The second enforcer hesitated, clearly reconsidering his approach, but the leader barked an order, and he charged forward once more. Ziva deflected his attack with a sweep of her arm, the energy pulse ricocheting off her barrier and slamming him into the wall. The leader, now visibly angered, stepped forward, his eyes glowing brighter. "You cannot win this, Ziva. You are no warrior." "I don't need to be a warrior," Ziva replied, her voice steady. "I just need to protect the person I care about." With a furious growl, the leader launched a powerful blast of energy at Ziva, the force of it threatening to overwhelm her. Ziva braced herself, the strain of holding her shield taking its toll. Sweat dripped down her brow as she pushed back with everything she had, refusing to let the enforcer break through. But the leader was relentless, and Ziva could feel her strength waning. She couldn't hold out much longer. In a desperate move, she channeled all of her remaining energy into one final blast, sending a wave of pure force toward the enforcer. The leader staggered back, caught off guard by the intensity of her attack. For a brief moment, there was silence, the two of them locked in a tense standoff. Then suddenly, the hold on Liam broke. Liam, now free, rushed to Ziva's side, grabbing her arm and pulling her back. "We have to get out of here," he urged, his voice low but urgent. Ziva nodded, her body trembling from the exertion. They had to escape, but the enforcers wouldn't let them go easily. As they made their way toward the exit, the leader of the enforcers began to rise, his eyes blazing with fury. "Ziva," he shouted, his voice echoing through the bar. "You cannot run from us. We will find you, no matter where you go." Ziva turned to face him one last time, her expression filled with both defiance and sorrow. "I'm not running. I'm choosing my path, and I will fight for it, no matter what it costs." With that, Ziva and Liam sprinted out of the bar, disappearing into the night. The enforcers, momentarily defeated, did not pursue, but Ziva knew this was only the beginning. The fight for her freedom, and for the life she had come to cherish with Liam, was far from over. Liam and Ziva raced through the dark streets, their footsteps echoing against the silence of the night. Ziva could feel her heart pounding in her chest, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that she was truly free for the first time. But she knew it wouldn't last long. The enforcers would regroup and come after them soon. She had to figure out a way to protect both herself and Liam. They rounded a corner and ducked into a narrow alleyway, pressing themselves against the cool brick wall. Liam was breathing heavily, his eyes wide with both confusion and adrenaline. "Ziva, what are we going to do?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Ziva scanned the street ahead, her mind racing. She had limited time to think, but one thing was clear: they couldn't keep running forever. The enforcers would track her no matter where she went, and Liam was now a target simply because of his association with her. "We need to get out of the city," Ziva said, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling around them. "We need to find a place where they can't track us." Liam nodded, though it was clear he was struggling to process everything that had happened. "But where? How do we stay ahead of them?" Ziva considered her options. The enforcers were equipped with advanced tracking systems that could trace her energy signature. She needed to disrupt their technology, but there was only one place she could go to do that, a place she had hoped to avoid. "The desert," Ziva said firmly. "There's an abandoned outpost far from here. It's from when my people first arrived on Earth, but it hasn't been used in years. I can access the technology there to mask our presence." Liam looked at her with uncertainty. The desert, that's a long way from here, and those enforcers, they won't just give up. Ziva glanced at him, her expression softening. I know, but it's our only chance. I can protect us if we get there. I just need you to trust me. Liam swallowed hard, then nodded. Okay, let's do it. They quickly made their way through the back streets, heading toward Liam's old car, parked a few blocks away. The city was eerily quiet, the calm before the storm. Ziva could feel the enforcers regrouping, gathering their strength for another attack. They wouldn't stop until they had her. As they reached the car, Liam fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking. Ziva, sensing his anxiety, placed a hand on his arm. We'll get through this, she said softly. Liam looked at her, his eyes reflecting both fear and determination. I hope you're right. They climbed into the car and sped off, the city lights quickly fading into the distance as they headed toward the barren desert outskirts. Ziva kept her eyes on the rearview mirror, half expecting the enforcers to appear at any moment. But for now, the road behind them remained clear. As the hours passed, and the city gave way to the endless expanse of desert, Ziva allowed herself a moment to breathe. Liam drove in silence, his face tense, his mind undoubtedly racing with questions. She knew she owed him an explanation. You probably have a lot of questions, Ziva began, breaking the silence. Liam glanced over at her, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. That's an understatement. I still don't fully understand what's happening. Who are these enforcers? Why are they after you? Ziva sighed, trying to find the right words. They're part of my species' governing force. I was sent to Earth as part of a mission to study human behavior, to learn about your emotions and connections. But I violated our protocol by getting too involved, by forming a bond with you. Liam blinked, absorbing her words. A bond, you mean? Ziva nodded. Yes, my people don't form emotional connections the way humans do. We reproduce through genetic engineering. But I've learned that there's something powerful about the way humans connect, about the way you feel. And now that I've experienced it, I can't go back to the way I was. Liam stared at the road ahead, the weight of her confession sinking in. So, they're here to take you back, to make sure you don't feel anymore. Yes, Ziva said quietly. To them, emotions are a threat. They complicate things. They make beings unpredictable, irrational. But I've come to believe that emotions are what make life meaningful. Liam was silent for a long moment, processing everything. So what happens if we don't make it to the outpost? What happens if they catch us? Ziva looked out the window, her heart heavy. If they catch me, they'll erase my memories of everything that's happened here. They'll wipe away everything I've felt, everything I've learned. And they'll eliminate anyone who knows too much. Liam's grip on the steering wheel tightened. So it's not just about taking you back. It's about making sure no one else knows the truth. Exactly, Ziva replied. And that's why we have to get to the outpost. I can deactivate their tracking systems, but I'll need time. If we can do that, we'll have a chance to escape, to start over somewhere they can't find us. The car fell into a tense silence as they drove deeper into the desert, the vast emptiness stretching out before them like a blank canvas. Ziva knew they were running out of time. The enforcers would be closing in soon. As the sun began to rise, casting a golden glow over the desert sands, Ziva spotted the outpost in the distance, an old rusted structure half buried in the dunes. It was a relic of a forgotten era, but it would be their sanctuary, at least for now. We're almost there, Ziva said, her voice filled with a mixture of hope and fear. Liam nodded, his jaw set with determination. Let's make sure we finish this. But as they approached the outpost, Ziva's heart sank. In the distance, a dark shape appeared on the horizon, moving fast. The enforcers were coming. The race against time had truly begun. The old outpost loomed before them, its rusted exterior barely visible against the shifting desert sands. Ziva and Liam's car skidded to a halt just outside the entrance. There was no time to waste. The enforcers were closing in fast. The hum of their hovercrafts echoed faintly across the horizon, growing louder with each passing second. "We need to move," Ziva said, her voice tight with urgency. She leaped out of the car, motioning for Liam to follow. Liam, still shaken from their harrowing escape, nodded and stumbled out of the vehicle. The weight of the situation hung heavily on him, but he pushed forward, following Ziva into the heart of the abandoned outpost. Inside, the structure was cold and dark, remnants of alien technology scattered across the floor. Old, decommissioned machines lined the walls, and the air smelled of dust and decay. Ziva quickly moved to a control panel at the center of the room, her fingers dancing over the keys as she activated what little remained of the facility's power. Liam stood by, watching in awe. "Can you really stop them from tracking us with this old tech?" Ziva didn't look up as she worked. "If I can override the system, it should create an energy shield that blocks their scanners. But it's ancient. It might take a minute they didn't have." The hum of the enforcer hovercrafts grew louder, more distinct. Liam could feel the vibrations in the floor beneath him now, a reminder that their pursuers were closing in fast. He glanced nervously at Ziva, who was frantically typing, her brow furrowed in concentration. Come on," she muttered under her breath, her alien eyes glowing faintly as she interfaced with the ancient technology. The console beeped and flickered, struggling to come back to life after years of inactivity. Liam moved to the entrance, peeking out to check on the enforcers' progress. His heart sank when he saw them. 3 sleek hovercrafts, each carrying a squad of enforcers in their black armored suits. They were only a few hundred meters away now, and moving fast. "Ziva, they're almost here," Liam shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "I need more time." She yelled back, her hands flying over the controls. The old machine groaned in protest, but Ziva refused to give up. She could feel the system slowly coming online, its ancient circuits sparking to life. But it wasn't fast enough. Liam's eyes darted between Ziva and the approaching enforcers. His mind raced, trying to think of something, anything, that could buy them more time. And then it hit him. He ran back to the car, his feet kicking up clouds of sand as he sprinted across the desert floor. Reaching the trunk, he popped it open and pulled out the emergency flare gun he had stashed there years ago. It wasn't much, but it might be enough to create a diversion. Liam loaded the flare gun and took a deep breath. He aimed high, toward the opposite direction of the outpost, and pulled the trigger. A brilliant red flare shot into the sky, arcing across the horizon in a blazing trail of light. For a brief moment, the enforcers paused. Their hovercrafts slowed as they scanned the area, momentarily distracted by the sudden burst of light. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give them a few extra seconds. Liam rushed back into the outpost, his heart pounding. "I've bought us some time, but it won't last long." "How much longer do you need?" Ziva didn't answer immediately, her eyes locked on the console as the final sequence of codes processed. Then, with a loud beep, the machine whirred to life. The entire facility shuddered as a faint, shimmering field of energy began to form around them. Ziva exhaled in relief. "It's done. The shield is up. They won't be able to track us inside." But even as the shield hummed to life, they both knew it was only a temporary solution. The enforcers would figure out the distraction soon enough, and once they did, they'd storm the outpost. And when that happened, Ziva and Liam would be trapped. "What do we do now?" Liam asked, his voice low. Ziva's eyes were dark with determination. "We fight." Liam stared at her, surprised by her sudden resolve. "Fight? How? They're armed to the teeth, and we got nothing but an old outpost and, well, this." He held up the now empty flare gun, a sardonic smile tugging at his lips. Ziva looked around the room, her gaze landing on a pile of discarded equipment in the corner. She rushed over, rummaging through the remnants of old tech. After a few moments, she pulled out a long, sleek device with glowing blue circuits running along its length. "This," she said, holding up the alien weapon, "is a pulse rifle. It can disrupt their armor and disable them temporarily. It's not much, but it'll have to do." Liam raised an eyebrow. "Temporarily? What happens after that?" "We keep disabling them until they're gone, or we run," Ziva replied, her voice steady. The hum of the hovercrafts returned, louder now, as the enforcers regrouped and closed in on their location. Ziva handed the pulse rifle to Liam, who hesitated before gripping it tightly. "I'm not exactly trained for this," he muttered. "Neither am I," Ziva said with a wry smile. "But we don't have a choice." The ground trembled as the hovercrafts landed just outside the outpost. The enforcers disembarked, their boots crunching against the sand as they advanced. Liam and Ziva took cover behind the makeshift barricades they had hastily constructed, pulse rifle in hand, waiting for the inevitable showdown. The door to the outpost shook as the enforcers tried to force their way in. The shield would hold them off for a few more minutes, but it wouldn't last forever. Ziva glanced at Liam, her eyes filled with determination. "No matter what happens," she said, "thank you. For everything." Liam met her gaze, his heart pounding in his chest. "We're not done yet," he replied, gripping the pulse rifle tighter. With a deafening crash, the door gave way, and the enforcers stormed in. The final battle had begun. The enforcers stormed into the outpost, their boots clanging against the metallic floor as they spread out, weapons drawn. Ziva and Liam crouched behind their makeshift barricade, hearts racing. Ziva's hands trembled as she gripped her pulse rifle, her alien senses heightened by the looming danger. The leader of the enforcers, a tall figure clad in black armor, gestured to his team. "Search the area. They're here." Liam swallowed hard, his throat dry. He glanced at Ziva. "Are you ready?" Ziva's violet eyes flickered with fear and determination. "We don't have a choice." With that, Liam stood up from behind the barricade, pulse rifle in hand, and took aim. He squeezed the trigger, and a burst of energy shot out from the weapon, hitting one of the enforcers square in the chest. The soldier's armor flickered and short-circuited, causing him to collapse in a heap on the floor. "Now," Ziva yelled, springing into action. Together, they unleashed a barrage of pulse fire, disabling 2 more enforcers before they could react. But the element of surprise quickly faded as the rest of the squad turned their weapons on them. "Get down," Liam shouted, pulling Ziva back behind the barricade as a hail of bullets and energy beams tore through the air where they had been standing just moments before. The outpost shook with the intensity of the firefight, sparks flying from the damaged control panel Ziva had used to activate the shield. It was quickly becoming clear that they were outmatched. The enforcer's armor was too strong, and the pulse rifle was only a temporary solution. Sooner or later, they would overwhelm them. Ziva clenched her jaw. "We can't keep this up much longer." Liam nodded, sweat pouring down his face. "There has to be another way out of here." But Ziva knew the truth. The outpost was a dead end. They were trapped, and the enforcers wouldn't stop until they had captured her, or worse. "We might not make it out," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the gunfire. Liam looked at her, his expression hardening. "We'll make it. We have to." Before Ziva could respond, a deafening explosion rocked the building. The enforcers had fired a rocket into the far wall, sending chunks of debris flying across the room. Ziva and Liam ducked for cover as a cloud of dust and rubble filled the air. "Ziva," Liam called out, his voice muffled by the chaos. "I'm okay," she shouted back, coughing through the dust. "But we're running out of time." The enforcers were closing in, their heavy footsteps echoing through the crumbling outpost. Ziva's mind raced. She couldn't let them capture her, couldn't let them undo everything she had fought for. And Liam, she couldn't let him die for her. Suddenly, an idea sparked in her mind. The ancient outpost still had one functioning system, The energy shield. If she could overload it, the resulting explosion might be enough to disable the enforcers long enough for them to escape. Liam, I have an idea, Ziva said, grabbing his arm. But it's risky. Riskier than staying here and getting shot. Liam asked, a grim smile on his face. Ziva's eyes narrowed. I can overload the energy shield. It'll cause an explosion big enough to take out the enforcers, but we'll have to run fast. Once I activate it, we'll have less than a minute to get out. Liam nodded, determination etched into his face. Let's do it. Ziva ran to the control panel, frantically typing in commands. The console beeped in protest, its circuits overheating as she pushed the ancient technology to its limits. The hum of the energy shield grew louder, vibrating through the walls of the outpost. The enforcers must have sensed something was wrong because their leader barked an order, and the soldiers began advancing with renewed urgency. Almost there, Ziva muttered under her breath, her fingers flying over the controls. The shield began to glow brighter, pulsing with unstable energy. Ziva glanced at Liam, who was standing by the entrance, pulse rifle at the ready. The enforcers were getting closer, their armored forms just visible through the dust and debris. Now Ziva, Liam yelled. With one final keystroke, Ziva activated the overload. The console let out a high-pitched whine. As the system went critical, the shield's energy building to a dangerous crescendo. We have to go, Ziva shouted, sprinting toward Liam. Together, they bolted out of the outpost and into the open desert. Behind them, the outpost shuddered, its structure straining under the immense power of the overloaded shield. The enforcers tried to follow, but it was too late. A massive explosion erupted from the outpost, a blinding flash of light that illuminated the night sky. The force of the blast sent shockwaves across the desert, knocking the enforcers off their feet and engulfing them in a cloud of debris. Ziva and Liam stumbled as the shockwave hit them, but they kept running, pushing themselves to the limit as the explosion rumbled behind them. When they finally collapsed in the sand, gasping for breath, the outpost was nothing more than a smoking ruin in the distance. Liam looked at Ziva, his chest heaving. Did we do it? Ziva nodded, her body trembling from exhaustion. We did it. For a long moment, they lay there in the sand, staring up at the stars. The danger had passed, but the weight of everything that had happened still hung in the air. After what felt like hours, Ziva finally spoke. I'm sorry, Liam. I never wanted you to get involved in this. Liam turned his head to look at her, his eyes soft. You didn't make me do anything. I chose to help you, and I'd do it again. Ziva's heart swelled with emotion. She had spent so long studying humans, trying to understand them. But it wasn't until now that she truly felt what it meant to be connected to another being. Liam wasn't just an experiment. He was her friend, maybe even more. What happens now? Liam asked, breaking the silence. Ziva gazed up at the stars, her violet eyes shimmering in the moonlight. Now, I find a way to go home. And you go back to your life. Liam frowned. After all this, you think I'm just going to go back to the way things were? Ziva smiled softly. No, but whatever happens next, it's your choice. Liam stared at her for a long moment before reaching out and taking her hand. Then I choose to stay. And in that moment, under the vast, alien sky, Ziva knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together.